It's your boy Charles. Charles on as well, just checking in. Hope you guys are having a good evening. We are getting ready to delve into another book audio reaction. Let's go ahead and play it, and I'm gonna come back with my reaction. Appreciate it, guys.
This video is for commentary purposes only. Hit that subscribe button and enjoy this crazy story. If you're interested in this particularly read, be sure to purchase it on Audible.
Butterfly in the sky,
I can go twice as high.
take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. I can go anywhere, friends to know and ways to grow, a reading rainbow. I can be anything, take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow, reading rainbow, reading rainbow, reading rainbow.
Well. Look what the cat drugged in. Ha ha ha. I'm just joking. Go sit your ass down and let a homie tell you a tale. A tale coming straight from the west side. Los Angeles. Tonight we are taking a look at the most infamous and controversial record label in history. Death Row Records. In the book Labyrinth, written by Randall Sullivan, we are introduced to a world of money, greed, music gangs and a lot of other gangster shit in 90s Los Angeles. So sit back, relax and enjoy this hip-hop gangster tale. If you want to purchase this audiobook, go to Audible to purchase. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, my reading rainbow children.
Prosecute because they knew if they charged Suge Knight, he would accuse them of racism. They figured this was all some kind of black shit that they didn't want to get involved with. Mark Anthony Bell eventually filed a civil suit against Suge Knight and Death Row Records and received a reported settlement of $600,000. He moved to Jamaica after collecting the money and had been lying low ever since. To Poole, the only thing more amazing than the DA's refusal to file charges was the fact that Suge Knight would expose himself to criminal prosecution in such a public way, especially given his legal situation at the time. 10 months earlier, in February of 1995, Suge finally had been forced to plead guilty to the felony assault of George and Linwood Stanley at Solar Records in July of 1992. Given his criminal history, it looked as if prison time was inevitable. If Suge Knight had learned anything, however, it was that almost any problem went away when you threw enough money at it. Person after person praised Knight to Judge John Ouderkirk and pleaded with the jurist to keep him out of prison. Among those offering testimonials were the Stanley brothers, who recently had signed a $1 million contract with Death Row Records, a deal negotiated, of course, by David Kenner. Also speaking on Suge's behalf was the deputy district attorney assigned to prosecute him, Lawrence Longo, who observed that Mr. Knight had become head of one of the largest record companies in the country and employed numerous residents of Los Angeles County, then recommended a 9-year suspended sentence with 5 years of probation. Judge Ouderkirk, who did not know that a few months later Longo's 18-year-old daughter, Gina, was going to become the first white singer signed to a recording contract with Death Row Records, or that a few months after this, Suge Knight would move into Longo's Malibu colony home, or that David Kenner would pay the prosecutor's family $19,000 in rent each month for the use of that property, went along with the deal. Any violation of his probation, including association with convicted felons, would send him to prison, but in the meantime, all Suge owed the state was 1 month in a halfway house. 30 days later, Knight was back in his Encino mansion, ready to begin the pursuit of his biggest coup to date, a Death Row Records contract with rap's brightest star, Tupac Shakur. Tupac was in New York State's Dannemora prison during the summer of 1995, serving a sentence of 52 months for a sexual assault conviction. During the past 4 years, he'd been arrested 8 times, narrowly avoiding conviction in the 1993 shooting of 2 off-duty Atlanta police officers, and barely escaping death when he was shot 5 times in the lobby of the Quad Studios, just off New York's Times Square. Despite recording 3 hugely successful albums during this period, Shakur was broke and desperate. Suge Knight recognized an opportunity. Immediately after his release from the halfway house in Los Angeles, Suge began making a series of trips to Dannemora that lasted all through that spring and into summer. Eventually, he persuaded Shakur that if the rapper agreed to join Death Row's roster, he would be out of custody in short order. 1 week after Tupac signed a 3-page agreement handwritten by David Kenner, the New York Court of Appeals announced that it was releasing Shakur from prison on $1.4 million bail. Interscope put up the money, and when Shakur walked out of Dannemora, Knight and Kenner were waiting outside in a white stretch limousine. Suge and Tupac appeared to be flying high, and in tandem during the next 12 months. Attacks on gangsta rap by William Bennett and C. Dolores Tucker rattled Interscope's corporate masters at Time Warner, but executive anxiety was considerably eased when Shakur's first album for Death Row, All Eyes on Me, released in February 1996, sold 3 million copies. Knight draped his stars in luscious groupies and ruby-studded jewelry, achieving an acme of in-house success when Death Row celebrated Snoop Dogg's acquittal on murder charges with the purchase of 4 Rolls-Royces. Both Death Row and Suge Knight were about to experience a rapid reversal of fortune, however, and Tupac Shakur, all of 25, had only a few months left to live. During her 1971 pregnancy, Afeni Shakur was standing trial as a member of the Panther 21, a group accused of conspiring to blow up several New York department stores. She named her son Tupac, Afeni Shakur liked to tell people,
Looking for a professional photographer for your next big event? Need video of your special day? Then look no further. For $100 an hour, have a professional photographer or videographer shoot your wedding, birthday party, quinceañera, bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, anniversary party, or whatever your special occasion may be. Highlight your event with professional, crisp photos and video. Check out Charles Arness Photography on Instagram, as well as book us for your next event. Must live in the Southern California area.
for the last Inca chief to be murdered by the Spanish conquistadors. Tupac's mother had been born Alice Faye Williams. She was a farm girl from North Carolina who took her new name after moving to Brooklyn and starting an affair with one of Malcolm X's bodyguards. Chants of black power were like a lullaby when I was a kid, Tupac himself once said. Her acquittal in the Panther 21 trial gave Afeni Shakur a short-lived celebrity in the early 70s. While living in a subsidized apartment in Manhattan near Columbia University, she lectured at Harvard and Yale. Her only son was called the Black Prince and forecast as the future leader of the revolution. By the late 70s, though, as the epoch of radical chic passed, Afeni and her son were reduced to living on welfare in the South Bronx, while many adult members of Tupac's Black Panther family were either behind bars or on the run. Tupac's godfather, Elmer Geronimo Pratt, was convicted in 1968 of murdering a schoolteacher during a robbery in Santa Monica and sentenced to life in prison. The boy's aunt, Assata Shakur, Joanne Chesimard, was found guilty in 1977 of murdering a New Jersey state trooper, though she did manage to break out of prison 2 years later and flee to Cuba. Tupac's stepfather, Mutulu Shakur, was found guilty of conspiring in that prison escape, as well as in the attempted robbery of a Brinks armored car in which 2 police officers and a guard were killed. Tupac was never certain about his father's identity. Afeni had been married to Black Panther activist Lumumba Shakur when she became pregnant, but told her son that his father was either a Harlem drug dealer who answered to Legs or another Panther Party member, Billy Garland. Garland claimed paternity, but Tupac reaped little benefit from this. He rarely saw the man, who never amounted to much anyway. Garland was a far better choice than Legs, however, who re-entered Tupac's life when the boy was about 12 and stayed around just long enough to turn Afeni into a crack addict. Afeni and her 2 children, Tupac had a younger sister named Sekiwa, moved to Baltimore in 1984 when Legs was arrested for credit card fraud. The man died of a drug-induced heart attack a short time later. Legs' death fucked Tupac up, Afeni once told an interviewer. It was 3 months before he cried. After he did, he told me, "I miss my daddy." "I remember crying all the time," Tupac told an interviewer about his early childhood. "My major thing growing up was that I just couldn't fit in." Baltimore would be good to the boy, though. His mother enrolled him in the city's School for the Arts, where he studied ballet, poetry, jazz, and acting. He performed in Shakespearean plays and played the Mouse King in The Nutcracker. The teenager who had been teased about his slight build and effeminate features in New York would say that he finally felt in touch with himself during his time at the School for the Arts. "I was starting to feel like I really wanted to be an artist," Tupac explained. "I was fucking white girls." The idyll ended when Tupac moved to California in 1988 to escape the squalor and poverty of a home where his mother smoked a crack pipe, all during her 3rd pregnancy. His new residence was in Marin City, an isolated ghetto in a geographic depression surrounded by rolling hills where white people with money had created a quasi-rustic suburbia. He didn't fit in with the black kids he met in California, Tupac said. "I dressed like a hippie. I couldn't play basketball. I was the target for street gangs. They used to jump me. I thought I was weird because I was writing poetry and I hated myself. I used to keep it a secret. I was really a nerd." Tupac's self-esteem was considerably enhanced in 1990, however, when he got a job as a dancer with the rap group Digital Underground. Only 1 year later, executives at Interscope heard a demo tape Tupac had made and signed him to a recording contract of his own. The young rapper's 1991 album, Tupacalypse Now, sold 500,000 copies, thanks in part to Vice President Dan Quayle, who declared that Tupac's tales of young black men in pitched battle with the pigs who invaded their neighborhoods had no place in our society. Tupac had started a film career that same year, landing a part in Juice even before his first album was recorded. When he moved to Los Angeles in 1992, however, Shakur immediately became absorbed in the gang culture of Crips and Bloods. In part, he was doing what artists and writers always do, sponging up stories, characters, and attitudes he could use in his songs. The young men who controlled the streets of Compton and South Central LA, however, placed an unusually high premium on authenticity. The only options they gave anyone, even visiting rap stars, were hard or soft, gangsta or punk. Either have the heart of a killer or expect to be treated like any other sucker. Fair game for anyone who was bad enough to take the watch off your wrist or the money from your pocket. At 5'8" and 150 pounds, with fine, soft features and eyes that just wouldn't go dead, Tupac scared absolutely nobody. At least not until he bought his first pistol and began practicing with it at local firing ranges. He started lifting weights too and began to cover his torso with tattoos. The most famous being the huge letters that spelled out "Thug Life" across his solar plexus, with the image of an assault rifle etched into his flesh above it. Tupac's first major brush with the law made headlines that summer, when he went home to attend the celebration of Marin City's 50th anniversary and got into a shouting match with some young men from the neighborhood that did not end until shots were fired and a 6-year-old boy was killed by a bullet to the head. Tupac's half-brother was arrested for murder, only to be released because of insufficient evidence. But all that most people remembered were headlines with the name Shakur in them. Back in LA, Tupac kept even the gangbangers guessing. When he wore red on the cover of his second album, 1993's Strictly For My Niggas, word spread that he had joined the Bloods. But soon after, he posed for pictures with a blue bandana on his head. During a drive to the Fox lot in Hollywood, where he was to tape a segment for In Living Color, Tupac pulled a gun on a limo driver who had asked him not to smoke pot in the vehicle, then looked on as the members of his entourage beat the man senseless. He played opposite Janet Jackson in his second movie, Poetic Justice, that summer, then on Halloween got into a shootout with 2 off-duty white police officers in Atlanta, wounding one man in his abdomen and the other in his buttocks. Charges of aggravated assault were dropped only when it came out that the cops Tupac had shot were a pair of drunken yahoos who had started things by brandishing a pistol stolen from a precinct evidence room, and that on the day of Tupac's first court hearing, one of them had been charged with aggravated assault, while both were accused of using the word niggers in a police report. The attendant publicity made Tupac simultaneously a media villain and a ghetto champion. By November of 1993, when he moved to New York for the filming of Above the Rim, Tupac's legal expenses had mounted to the point that he began telling people he had to change his life and clean up his act or declare bankruptcy. Smelling blood in the water, Suge Knight made his first overture to Tupac, paying $200,000 for a single song, Pour Out a Little Liquor. When Knight offered a long-term recording contract, however, Tupac turned Suge down, choosing to align himself instead with music promoter Jacques Agnon, better known as Haitian Jack. The rapper's bad press, meanwhile, continued to mount. He was the target of civil suits that blamed his lyrics for the shooting of a Texas state trooper and the paralysis of a young woman who was hit by a stray bullet during a near riot at one of his concerts in Arkansas. The headlines were louder still when, shortly before Thanksgiving, Tupac was arrested for the sexual assault that would send him to Dannemora. What had happened would never be clear, largely because the victim was a young woman whose own behavior inspired neither trust nor sympathy. Tupac claimed he first encountered Ayanna Jackson when she approached him on the dance floor of the downtown Manhattan nightclub, Nell's, unzipped his pants, and led him by the penis to a dark corner of the club where she performed oral sex on him. Jackson insisted that Tupac had chased her all over the club before a brief and furtive encounter in which he pushed my head down on his penis in a brief 3-second encounter. Whatever, the young woman not only slept with Shakur that night, but showed up 4 days later at Tupac's suite in the Parker Meridian, wearing a tight dress and within minutes was giving him a massage in the bedroom. The two soon were joined by Jacques Agnon and a friend of the promoters. Tupac and the other two men claimed Jackson was a willing participant in group sex. The young woman said she was the victim of a gang rape. 1 year later, a New York jury would essentially split the difference, but in the meantime, Tupac was attending to other troubles. On February 1st, 1994, Tupac was in Los Angeles Municipal Court to answer assault charges filed against him by film director Alan Hughes, who, along with his partner brother Albert, had tried to cast Tupac in the film Menace to Society.
Wow. So what do y'all think about that, man? The book is called Labyrinth. You can go right now on Audible and purchase it. Check it out yourself, man. It's actually really good. Homeboy gets really in depth about Tupac. And man, I couldn't believe Tupac was a nerd. Huh? Who would have thought? But I mean, come on, he was into poetry. I guess that some would say that that's nerdy behavior. He was into poetry and literature and stuff like that. But yeah, I never would think that Tupac had that kind of low self-esteem and thought he was like an outcast, you know. But you know, I think he did say that in one of his songs, though, you know. I forgot how the song went, and it was like resulting in the outcast and the outlaw. I forgot how the song went, but wow. But yeah, check out Labyrinth. It's on Audible. It gets into really good detail about the Tupac and Biggie murder, and it also goes in depth about Death Row Records in LA and Bad Boy in New York, and just different stuff that I didn't even know about when it comes to Tupac. And this is my era. Stuff I didn't know about that dealt with Tupac and Notorious Big. So anyway, check that book out, guys. Thanks for watching. Hit that thumbs up button. Let me know what y'all think about what y'all just heard. Let me know if y'all read this book or heard or already listened to the book on Audible, and let me know what y'all think about it in the comments. Subscribe to Charles in This World. Y'all take care.
Enjoying this shit so far? Then hit that thumbs up button.
Wow.
more of these fascinating stories and true crimes, subscribe to Charles Arnis World. Thanks for watching.
It's your boy Charles. Charles on there as well, just checking in. Hope you guys having a good evening. We are getting ready to delve into another book audio reaction. Let's go ahead and play it and then come back to my reaction. Appreciate it, guys.
Said his stepbrother Mopreme. In New York to shoot the 1994 film, Above the Rim, Tupac became enmeshed with a group of notorious Queens toughs. He was modeling his character Birdie, a gangster involved in youth basketball programs, on a Haitian-born high roller called Jacques Haitian Jack Agnant. A feared and influential music promoter, Haitian Jack also had a hustle resembling the character Omar from the seminal TV series The Wire. "My thing is robbing drug dealers," he told Derek Parker, the retired NYPD hip-hop cop who ran a special unit focused on rap-related crimes. "The drug dealer, see, he isn't going to call the police." Tupac had noticed Haitian Jack at a Manhattan club, surrounded by women and champagne, and asked for an introduction. They also spent time at a Queens bar where Jack would bring through celebrities including Madonna, Shabba Ranks, and Jamaican musician Buju Banton. Tupac briefly dated Madonna after Rosie Perez introduced them at the 1993 Soul Train Awards in LA. Biggie warned Tupac to keep his distance from Haitian Jack, to no avail. Tupac liked Jack's swagger. He introduced the rapper to high-end jewelry and Versace duds, as well as the local gangsters who called the shots. "He loved the respect and recognition I got in New York, and I think he wanted that same respect," Haitian Jack said. The two were partying at a downtown Manhattan club called Nell's in November 1993, where Tupac met a 19-year-old woman named Ayanna Jackson. They got close on the dance floor. Tupac says she gave him a blowjob in a corner at the club and went back to his suite at the Le Parker Meridian Hotel. 4 days later, she met up with him at the hotel again, only to encounter not just Tupac, but Haitian Jack, Tupac's road manager Charles Man Fuller, and another man who was not identified. There, she alleged, the group gang-raped her and forced her to perform oral sex. Tupac claimed he left the bedroom when the other men entered and fell asleep. She called the police, and Tupac, Haitian Jack, and Fuller were arrested. The police also found guns, which Tupac later claimed belonged to Biggie. The prosecution alleged Tupac, charged with sexual abuse, sodomy, and illegal weapons possession, had offered up Jackson as a reward for his boys. Tupac denied this, but after the trial, told Vibe he blamed himself for doing nothing to protect Jackson from the other men. Before the trial began, Tupac's and Fuller's cases were severed from Haitian Jack's. In a deal that Tupac and his lawyer deemed too good to be true, Jack pleaded guilty to 2 misdemeanors and avoided jail time. Believing Haitian Jack was a snitch, Tupac told a New York Daily News reporter that Jack had set him up. Ayanna Jackson and Haitian Jack have denied this. Calling out a reputed gangster in the press is not sensible. But ironically, after spending so much time with Jack and his ilk, Tupac had begun to feel invincible. He went wherever he wanted, wearing flashy jewelry worth thousands of dollars. Secure in his street credentials, he was convinced that nobody would mess with him. Supporting his extended family and paying lawyers for his interminable string of court cases, Tupac's bank accounts withered. In late 1994, he agreed to record a guest verse for a rapper named Little Sean, who was close with Puffy and Biggie. The invitation came from Sean's manager, Jimmy Henchman Rosemond, whom Tupac had met through Haitian Jack, and Tupac was to be paid $7,000. On November 30th, 1994, Tupac arrived, stoned, to Quad Recording Studios in Times Square, the spot where he recorded much of his next album, Me Against the World. Arriving with 3 associates, none of whom were bodyguards, he encountered 3 other men he didn't know, wearing army fatigues. This was Brooklyn fashion, so Tupac assumed they were with Biggie. He felt better about the situation when Biggie's affiliated rapper, Lil C's, yelled down to him that Biggie was upstairs recording. Puffy was there too. But before Tupac's crew could get on the elevator, the men in army fatigues drew 9mm guns and ordered them to the floor. Instead, Tupac reached for his own gun. He was shot, beaten, and robbed of his jewelry. He played dead, and the assailants left, at which time he staggered into the elevator and rode it upstairs. When the doors opened, he saw a group including Puffy, Biggie, and Haitian Jack's associate henchmen. Tupac said the crew looked surprised and guilty, but Puffy claimed they showed him nothing but love and concern. Tupac believed the incident was more than a random heist. "It was like they were mad at me," he said. He claimed to have taken 5 bullets, including shots to the head and through his scrotum. Forensic evidence, however, seemed to indicate he shot himself. In the haste of getting his gun out of his waistband, "I believe he pulled the trigger," said former LAPD investigator Greg Kading, who has reviewed the investigative material. "I think the wounds to his head were superficial lacerations from being pistol whipped. If they went there to execute him, they could have certainly done that." Bill Courtney, a retired NYPD cop who also worked hip-hop cases, believed the stick-up was a response to Tupac's daily news comments against Haitian Jack. "A message was being sent to him not to name-drop," he said. "Nobody came to rob you," henchmen told Vibe in 2005. "They came to discipline you." Tupac believed henchmen himself orchestrated the crime, which was also the conclusion of a bombshell 2008 Los Angeles Times story. That piece by Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Chuck Phillips asserted that both Puffy and Biggie knew about the setup in advance, although they were allegedly told it would only involve a beating and no shooting. The story was later retracted after it was found to have been informed by falsified documents, and Phillips was soon laid off. That wasn't the end of the story, however. In 2011, one of Henchman's former associates, named Dexter Isaac, claimed in an interview he was one of the men in army fatigues and that he'd been hired by henchmen. "He gave me $2,500 plus all the jewelry I took, except for one ring, which he took for himself," Isaac said. Not long afterward, Henchman himself confessed to his involvement. Phillips demanded, but did not receive, an apology from the Los Angeles Times. Puffy and Biggie denied their involvement in the crime, or any prior knowledge of it. Haitian Jack also claimed he wasn't involved, and following a separate conviction, was deported to Haiti in 2007. One of Tupac's associates who came with him to Quad Studios that day, Randy Stretch Walker, was murdered in Queens exactly a year later. Police suspected a connection between the two events, but were unable to prove it.
Looking for a professional photographer for your next big event? Need video of your special day? Then look no further. For $100 an hour, have a professional photographer or videographer shoot your wedding, birthday party, quinceañera, bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, anniversary party, or whatever your special occasion may be. Highlight your event with professional, crisp photos and video. Check out Charles Arness Photography on Instagram, as well as book us for your next event. Must live in the Southern California area.
Strictly for My Niggas, another hit. Though its most popular track, I Get Around, is a boilerplate warning to ladies who tie him down, the work is otherwise populated with heartbreaking stories about the struggles of black folks. The title, according to his stepbrother Mo Preem, references the fact that no matter what we do, we still gonna be niggas to certain people. I'm sick of being tired. Tupac raps on The Streets Are Death Row, a song unrelated to the label. Sick of the sirens, body bags, and the gunfiring. Tell Bush push the button 'cause I'm fed. Tired of hearing these voices in my head. Strictly shows a maturity in his songwriting. Papa's song is not a standard, "fuck you, Dad," lament. Rather, after a son admonishes his father for being gone during his childhood, Papa gives his side of the story. Having heard the 5 stair steps, ooh child, things are gonna get easier. In Boys in the Hood, Tupac employed a sample of it on Keep Your Head Up. Some say the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. I say the darker the flesh, then the deeper the roots, begins the song, which would later inspire rapper Kendrick Lamar. It's dedicated in part to Latasha Harlins, the 15-year-old killed in 1991 by a South Central store owner who believed she was shoplifting. Like Tupacalypse Now, Strictly for My Niggas documents the tribulations of and provides a balm for those making their way through a racist society. These aren't really gangsta rap albums, since gangsta implies characters enriching themselves through criminal enterprise and violence. That wasn't Tupac, at least not yet. Tupac's activism was largely lost on white critics. It probably didn't help he was constantly going to jail. Slated to perform a homecoming show at a 1992 Marin City festival, he was confronted by a group of people angry over negative interview comments he'd made in the press about his former town. It was a combination of jealousy and anger, said Mo Preem, who was with him that day. Pac was becoming successful. There was a lot of haters. A tussle broke out. Shots were fired, and a 6-year-old boy riding a bicycle nearby was accidentally killed. Though Tupac didn't fire the gun, a .380 Colt automatic, it was registered to him. A sheriff's sergeant accused Mo Preem of pulling the trigger. I'm not talking about who did what. I'm not a snitch, Mo Preem told me when I interviewed him in 2016. It was just unfortunate and sad, and we didn't start it. Tupac and Mo Preem were arrested and then released, owing to a lack of evidence. But the boys' parents filed a civil suit, which was settled for a 6-figure sum, paid by Tupac's record label. Tupac was dogged by legal trouble for much of his adult life. In 1993, he allegedly assaulted a limo driver outside of an In Living Color taping after the man complained the rapper was smoking weed. The charges were dropped. Shortly thereafter, at a show in Lansing, Michigan, Tupac brandished a baseball bat against another rapper and did a short jail stint. He said he and his road manager were provoked. I beat up the director of Menace to Society, he bragged on Yo MTV Raps that same year, referencing the film directed by Alan and Albert Hughes, in which he'd been slated to appear. They fired me, but did it in a roundabout punk snitch way. So I caught them on the streets and beat their behind. Alan Hughes tells the story differently.
The reason why I want to say that for the record, I'm not going to get into details because, again, you got people that think I'm taking shots at Tupac. I'm not taking shots at Tupac. I'm telling you what I experienced, what I saw. And if you were to ask what I saw, what people saw happen to me, so I'm not going to go blow by blow, but what ultimately we all know what happened is those 10, 15 guys jumped me, Now, Tupac started with a sucker punch. I'll say that much. Like, I couldn't believe that because I was walking away from him, I couldn't believe that. And then, the details, Vlad.
Yeah.
Tussle ensues.
I think at one point you said you actually, after punching you picked him up and tried to slam him against the car. And then
No, he was on the car.
He was on the car. You tried to slam him. You picked him up, I guess.
Yeah, he was on the hood of the car.
He was on the hood of the car, but then all his homies came in and
That
jumped
was a
you.
wrap. Yeah.
I just see Alan getting beat by like 10 people. I hear,
Was Tupac one of those 10?
yes,
Okay.
Tupac one of the people. I seen Albert, his brother, run. He left the scene. He went toward the freeway, a 101 freeway, exiting.
So he ditched his twin brother.
What? He fled the scene.
Okay.
track shoes done. So he left. Alan's there taking a beating, but when we get close enough to see what's going on, because at the time I wasn't close to Tupac or whatever. I just seen Alan, who was my boy. I'm like, hold up, I'm gonna help him at the time.
Right.
But it happened so fast, I didn't get a chance to. I'm like, hold up, what's going on? And I just felt like it was some sucker shit.
Before he was canned, Tupac was disruptive on set, in front of a cast that included Jada Pinkett, Hughes said. For the sake of the movie, Tupac needed to go, he added, saying the firing was straightforward. But Tupac lost his $300,000 payday, and not long afterward, at a video shoot, confronted Hughes with a posse of Crips in tow. Tupac threw a sucker punch. Hughes threw him on top of a truck, and then the Crips beat Hughes badly. After bragging about the incident on Yo MTV Raps, Tupac got 15 days in jail. The Hughes brothers had worked with Tupac before, initially finding him funny and charming, but something changed around the time of Juice's release in early 1992, Allen said, claiming that after Tupac saw a screening of the film, he was never the same. He said Tupac subsequently began rolling heavy with gang members, switching sets a lot, whether with the Rolling 60s or the Bloods or some gang in Houston, whichever fit where he was at the time. Indeed, Tupac was photographed in both red and blue bandanas, though he doesn't appear to have joined any gang in particular. He also got increasingly tatted up. Though common today, heavily inked rappers were then rare. Tupac's work included his now iconic Thug Life tattoo across his abs, which stood for "The hate you give little infants fucks everyone." Thug Life was Tupac's mantra. It was a code that informed the Watts Peace Treaty he helped craft, and it was the name of one of his rap groups. It was really supposed to be about saving thugs' lives, said Mo Preem, a Thug Life member. A lot of people got the message, but a whole lot didn't. "I'm thugging against society. I'm thugging against the system that made me," Tupac said. Even Tupac's mother Afeni didn't initially understand it, finding the word thug hard to reconcile with the Black Panther ideals on which her son was raised. On the 1992 day, when she found out he was going to get his Thug Life tattoo, she begged his friend, Sharice Henry, to drive over to the Sunset Strip tattoo parlor to stop it. Henry arrived too late.
What's up, y'all? It's your boy Charles and Ezra just checking in. So what do y'all think about that book, man? Pretty interesting, huh? Crazy, man. Interesting story. Listen, go ahead and leave your comments and subscribe to Charles and Ezra.
Looking for a professional photographer for your next big event? Need video of your special day? Then look no further. For $100 an hour, have a professional photographer or videographer shoot your wedding, birthday party, quinceañera, bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, anniversary party, or whatever your special occasion may be. Highlight your event with professional, crisp photos and video. Check out Charles Arness Photography on Instagram, as well as book us for your next event. Must live in the Southern California area.
What up, baby? Your boy Charles on his word, thumbs up button, guys. We're going to go get into Labyrinth by Randall Sullivan. Let's talk about Tupac and his reluctancy to go to that Bruce Seldon fight that night he passed on. Let's check it out, guys. Hit thumbs up button, subscribe to Charles on his world. Appreciate it.
Tupac seemed to sense that his attendance would put him at risk, and on the morning of the 7th, he told Yasmin Fula that instead he would go to Atlanta to deal with some problems among his relatives. During the next several hours, Suge Knight convinced Shakur to change his mind and go to Las Vegas after all.
Mm.
But Tupac confided to Kidada Jones that he still felt uneasy about the trip. She advised him to wear his bulletproof vest, but Tupac said the weather was too hot for that. Late that afternoon, he boarded a flight to Vegas and said goodbye to Los Angeles for the last time.
I heard he drove. Hold up.
Suge Knight had
I heard that he drove to Las Vegas. I ain't heard he took a flight.
spent much of the past year establishing himself as a presence in Las Vegas. The most visible indication of how Suge hoped to be viewed in city was the house he purchased on Monte Rosa Avenue in the Paradise Valley Township, home to both the toniest estates and most influential citizens in the Las Vegas Valley. Suge's new house was right across the street from Wayne Newton's Shenandoah Ranch, and just 2 doors down from the home of fighter Mike Tyson, who had persuaded Knight to buy the place.
Hmm.
Built of red brick, the house was a sprawling 5,215 feet set on 1.33 acres, with a backyard that bordered a golf course. Suge first had seen it in the Martin Scorsese film Casino, where it served as the home of the organized crime character played by Robert De Niro, Frank Lefty Rosenthal. Suge wore a 7-carat diamond in his ear when he made the deal to buy the place, then proceeded to redecorate in a style not seen previously even in garish Las Vegas, painting the bottom of his swimming pool blood red, then covering the interior of his home with same-color carpet. Much of the furniture was red, too, as was the Rolls-Royce Corniche that Suge drove around town. Even before he purchased his house in Paradise Valley, Suge had endeavored to form associations with those connected to the organized crime families of New York and Chicago. Among the first Las Vegas attorneys he hired was John Spilotro, whose father, Tony the Ant Spilotro, had been headman for the Chicago mob during most of the 1970s, before
Wow.
being brutally beaten, then buried alive in an Indiana cornfield.
That was
Suge
okay.
would step up a class when he retained the services of the notorious Oscar Goodman, an attorney who billed himself as mouthpiece for the mob and represented most of the important mafiosi charged with crimes in Nevada, as well as Goodman's partner, the former U.S. Attorney David Cheshoff. To open his new nightclub just off the Strip, Suge had relied upon the only 2 Caucasians who were significant figures at Death Row Records. The first, of course, was David Kenner, whose connections to the Genovese family had long fascinated Suge. Perhaps even more helpful, though, was the accountant Suge had hired as Death Row's new business manager, Steve Cantrock. It was Cantrock who introduced Suge to Robert Amira, the Las Vegas businessman who several years earlier had been indicted along with Joseph Colombo Jr. and Alphonse the Whale Marola in a scheme to defraud the Dunes Hotel with an airline ticket scam. The case against Amira had been dismissed, in inimitable Las Vegas fashion, when the judge claimed he had seen the prosecutor and the jury foreman communicating improperly. With Amira's assistance, Suge was able to take possession of a club that had been known as Botany's back during his days at UNLV, when the patrons were mostly wealthy white people. Botany's previous owner had been convicted a few years earlier for helping the Chicago mob skim money from the Stardust Hotel, however, and the nightclub had languished ever since. Suge reopened the venue as the 662 Club and catered to a predominantly black clientele. The name 662 had multiple meanings. On a phone pad, those numbers spelled out MOB for Member of the Bloods. Tupac Shakur liked to say the letters stood for money over bitches. The numbers 662 also appeared in the California Penal Code, however, where they were used to refer to death row inmates. Tupac's first performance after his release from the New York State prison system had been at the 662 Club in November of 1995. The club was packed to nearly twice its capacity that evening, and a crowd that included the entourages of athletes Mike Tyson and Deion Sanders got completely out of hand. The Las Vegas police were not happy about being forced to deal with this many drunk and dangerously violent characters and threatened to close the place down. The scene was only slightly less rowdy when Suge brought Tupac and Snoop Dogg back to Las Vegas with him for the Mike Tyson-Frank Bruno fight in the spring of 1996, and again when Suge and his death row entourage opened the club after Tyson's fight with Peter McNeely that August. Suge did post himself at the door of the club that night and personally tossed several troublemakers out into the parking lot. But the cops were furious anyway about the trouble the 662 Club was causing them, and followed through on their promise to close the place. Knight was able to open the club for the evening of the Tyson-Selden fight on September 7th, only by arranging to have his after-party sponsored by Las Vegas PD officer Patrick Barry, a retired professional boxer who was ostensibly using the event to raise money for Barry's boxing gym. A big sign on the club's marquee advertised the event as Barry's Boxing Benefit, while smaller letters identified the organizer as SKP, Suge Knight Productions. A line started forming outside the club at 5:30 that afternoon, hours before the fight's scheduled start, and hundreds of people were trying to buy $75 tickets for the 662 Club's party. Tupac Shakur was staying with Kidada Jones at the Luxor Hotel in one of the rooms Suge had booked for the weekend. Although his backup singers, the Outlaw Immortals, served as both an entourage and a security detail, Tupac's two main bodyguards were a pair of black ex-police officers, Kevin Hackey and Frank Alexander. Hackey wasn't in Las Vegas, however, having fallen out with Death Row's head of security, Reggie Wright Jr., over $10,000 he had been paid to work on the set of Tupac's most recent film, Gang Related. That money should have been paid to Right-Way Protective Services, insisted Wright, who retaliated by firing the bodyguard. Frank Alexander was alone when he arrived for a meeting with Suge's Las Vegas attorneys, who explained that neither Alexander nor any of Tupac's other security personnel could carry firearms because Death Row had failed to secure the proper clearances from the police. While Alexander fretted about Tupac's vulnerability, the rapper himself was losing big at a blackjack table in the Luxor. The other members of the Death Row contingent noticed right off that Tupac wasn't wearing the medallion of the hooded figure in an electric chair that had been around his neck since Suge presented him with it months earlier. The new figure on Tupac's gold chain was a $30,000 diamond-studded replication of the emblem he had chosen for his own company, Euthanasia, a black angel of death, on its knees, head tilted down, backed by enormous wings and a golden halo. Tupac finally broke his losing streak and was ahead of the game when he left the casino and made his way across a footbridge to the MGM Grand, where the Tyson-Bruno fight would take place. Since his release from prison following a rape conviction, Tyson had become a heroic figure for many gangbangers who believed him persecuted, and an honorary member of the Death Row family. Suge attended every one of his fights, and so did Tupac. Included with Knight and Shakur in the crowd that evening would be the Reverend Jesse Jackson, basketball stars Charles Barkley and Magic Johnson, as well as the hip-hop acts Run DMC and Too Short. At the entrance to the big room where the MGM Grand staged its fights, Tupac was forced to stop and wait for Suge, who had the tickets. It had become commonplace in recent months for Suge to keep even his biggest stars waiting 2, 3, 4, even 5 hours so that he could make an entrance that established his dominance over them.
Wow.
As he watched other celebrities slip inside and take their seats, Tupac was surrounded by fans who pressed forward, ducking under the arms of security guards to take his photograph or demand an autograph. Finally, he lost his temper. "Fuck this shit," he told Alexander. "Every time we go somewhere, he always has to be fucking late. I didn't want to come to Vegas, no fucking way. We gonna miss the fucking fight." Just as Shakur began to threaten to find his own tickets, Knight showed up. Tupac immediately wiped the angry expression from his face, recalled Alexander, who understood that the rapper still hoped for a more amicable parting with Suge than Dre had managed. Suge and Tupac sat together, but weren't in their seats long. The fight was over in less than 2 minutes, as Tyson came out of his corner throwing punches at a furious rate, and Selden dropped to the canvas for good 109 seconds into the first round. While many at courtside were disappointed, and a few even shouted that the fight had been fixed, Tupac was thrilled by what he'd witnessed. He danced around with a wild look in his eyes, pumping his arms and throwing punches at the air as he shouted, 50 blows, 50 blows, I counted them." Tupac led the Death Row group backstage to mingle with Tyson, but after only a couple of minutes, Suge announced that they had to leave. A startled Tupac complained that it would be the first time he had not congratulated Mike personally after a fight. But Big Suge grabbed the little rapper's arm and led him toward the exit. As they approached the auditorium's main entrance, Suge threw his arm around Tupac's shoulders, embracing him like the little brother that he often called his biggest star. Just as the two men passed through the doors, however, trailed by Alexander and Shug's entourage of mob Piru homeboys, a blood named Trayvon Trey Lane approached Tupac and whispered something in his ear.
That didn't happen.
Alexander could see trouble coming, especially after he watched Tupac turn his head to stare at a young black man who stood on the other side of the hallway, like he was anticipating the arrival of someone, as the bodyguard would put it later. The young man who stood alone was Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, a South Side Crip, who, along with 7 or 8 of his homies, had jumped him, Trey said, outside a Foot Locker store in the Lakewood Mall. Anderson and the other Crips had snatched the death row medallion off the chain on his neck as they pummeled him, Trey said. Anxious to impress Shug and the other Bloods with his continuing loyalty, Tupac immediately charged across the hallway toward Anderson, trailed by Knight and his entourage. "You from the South?" Tupac asked, but before Baby Lane could answer, Tupac had thrown a punch at him. The Crip went to the ground immediately, recalled Alexander, who found it difficult to believe the skinny rapper could hit that hard. And Baby Lane offered almost no resistance, Alexander said, as Shug and the other Bloods surrounded him, punching, kicking, and stomping. When Tupac's euthanasia medallion tore loose and fell to the ground, the rapper stooped to pick it up. Alexander, a bodybuilder who once had finished second in the Mr. World Championship, seized the opportunity to pull Tupac away and half drag, half carry him toward the nearest exit. Shug and the others were still on Anderson, kicking him while he was down, recalled Alexander, until the hotel's security force arrived on the scene. Shug shouted, "Let's go," and the others immediately scattered in different directions. Alexander led Tupac outside without waiting around to watch what would happen next, but they were at once spotted by a huge crowd of groupies and hangers-on who chased them back to the Luxor. Kidada, whom Alexander considered a surly, snobbish brat, was waiting in their room at the Luxor, where Tupac regaled her with a description of the beating. She was giggling in excitement, recalled Alexander. The girl seemed to love this stuff, though she never got any closer than hearing about it from her boyfriend. Tupac didn't invite her to the party at the 662 Club either, largely ignoring the young woman as he changed from a tan silk shirt and blue jeans into a black and white basketball tank top and teal-colored sweatpants, then led Alexander back downstairs. As they stepped outside the main entrance to the Luxor, Shug and the rest of the death row entourage were loading into a caravan of vehicles for the drive to the 662 Club. They would go to his house first, announced Shug, who intended to delay their arrival so the group could make a grand entrance. Tupac wanted to drive his Hummer with Alexander in the passenger seat and 2 buddies from the Outlaws in back, but Shug told him that they had private business to discuss and persuaded the rapper to ride with him in the big new BMW sedan he had purchased 1 week earlier. Tupac told Alexander to drive his friend Yafu Fula and another member of the Outlaws to Shug's place in Kidada's Lexus. The group stayed only briefly at Knight's house, where everyone took a look at the new death row emblem painted on the bottom of the pool. The caravan that headed toward the strip about 15 minutes later was composed entirely of luxury vehicles. Mercedes, BMWs, Cadillacs, Lexuses. Shug's homies cranked up the Pioneer sound system in the caddy they drove, so loud that the ground was trembling, recalled Alexander, who followed right behind Shug's black BMW. Knight and Shakur were listening to Tupac's newest album, Machiavelli, at an obliterating volume, until a police officer riding a bicycle waved them over and forced Shug to turn the sound down. When the cop let them go, Shug continued toward the strip. Alexander hoped that Shug would turn right on Tropicana so that they could enter the club from the rear, but instead, the BMW blew through a light and turned on Flamingo Road, where Tupac's approach to the club became a public spectacle. Cars filled with groupies whose breasts spilled out of low-cut dresses pulled up alongside to show Tupac their assets and angle for inclusion in his entourage. By the time the caravan approached the Maxim Hotel, dozens of cars filled mostly with young women had joined it, and the unarmed Alexander was becoming increasingly nervous. Scores of people on the street and sidewalk angled for a glimpse of Tupac when Shug stopped for a red light at Corval Lane, right behind the black Cadillac his homeboy K-Dove drove. A Chrysler sedan immediately pulled up on the BMW's left, filled with 4 young women who smiled to catch Tupac's attention. Moments later, a white Cadillac rolled to a stop slightly in front and to the right of the BMW. 4 young black men were inside, witnesses said, two in front and two in back. But only one riding in the rear extended a .40 caliber Glock through the open left rear window and used it to spray the BMW's passenger side with between 10 and 15 bullets. According to Frank Alexander, the shooter had been sitting on the right side of the Cadillac and had reached across the passenger on his left to fire the shots. A black person, wearing a skull cap, a beanie cap, was the best description of the killer Alexander could give. At least 100 witnesses watched as Tupac tried to climb into the back seat of the BMW and was hit 4 times in the process. 2 bullets tore open the Thug Life tattoo on his torso, while 2 others wounded him in the hand and leg. The Cadillac peeled away and made a right turn on Corval, heading away from the strip. Instead of calling 911 on his flip phone, Suge made a U-turn against the oncoming traffic as vehicles scattered to avoid a collision. The rest of the death row caravan did the same, jumping medians as they headed toward the strip. 2 bicycle cops who had heard the shots gave chase and were able to catch the BMW only because 2 of the car's tires had been shot out. The shooting scene itself was abandoned as witnesses scattered and the white Cadillac sped away. When Suge stopped the BMW, the 2 bicycle cops approached with guns drawn, and Suge stepped outside with one side of his head.
Anyway, y'all, that is from the Labyrinth. Man, pretty crazy stuff. I mean, we've heard this story before, man, but I don't know, man. It's been speculation about who actually took Tupac's life. Apparently, they said that it wasn't Orlando Anderson. They said it was somebody else. And I think Tupac's dad did an interview with I think it's Art of Dialogue, Bomb First. I can't think of the name. I can't remember the name of the site, but uh, Billy Garland is Tupac's real dad that's still living, and he did a couple of interviews, and he said he believed that Orlando Anderson didn't kill his son. He think it was somebody else. It might have been the police and stuff like that, but I don't know. Whatever. I just think that such a loss, you know. Anyway, what do y'all think about this? It's called Labyrinth. It's by Randall Sullivan. You can get it on Audible. Uh, this is really good, man. Y'all need to check it out. Maybe I'll get a chance. It's on Audible. And go ahead and give me the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel. That's all I'm here for. Appreciate it. What's up, y'all? It's your boy Charles with the Griot, Charles Arnaz World. Just tapping in. We are delving into a book called Labyrinth by Ronald Sutherland. It basically goes in detail about the operation of Death Row and also the investigation of Tupac and Biggie. Let's go ahead and play a little excerpt from this book, y'all. Hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to this channel. Let's check it out. And I'm gonna come back with my reaction.
Tupac tipped his hand more by what he did than by anything he said. During early 1996, he insisted upon negotiating his movie deals without Suge Knight's agency. And in February of 1996, Death Row's biggest star formed his own and entirely separate production company, Euthanasia, then brought his old friend Yasmin Fula to LA to run the business. From the first, Fula found it difficult to obtain any financial accounting from Death Row Records. Whenever she sent Suge Knight's office a request for documents, Fula said what she received instead were cars and jewelry. She began to feel there was this dark cloud over us, Fula told the New Yorker's Connie Brook. I knew so much was wrong. While Tupac would not let Fula prod Suge Knight with legal threats, he did refuse to let any of his younger cousins sign contracts with Death Row. Tupac also began to rely increasingly on his East Coast attorney, Harvard Law School professor Charles Ogletree, who was frustrated by his dealings with the rapper's Los Angeles lawyer, David Kenner. Since Tupac's finances were entirely controlled by Death Row, he had no choice but to rely on the record company's assistance in settling Tupac's numerous civil lawsuits, Ogletree complained. David Kenner would tell him the check was in the mail, then that it was being sent by FedEx, then that it was being wired. The money never seemed to arrive, however. By that summer, Tupac had become increasingly overt about his plan to escape Death Row. He had a strategy, Ogletree told Connie Brook. The idea was to maintain a friendly relationship with Suge, but to separate his business. That was not a difficult thing to accomplish legally, Ogletree said, but you have to live after that. It was a question of how to walk away with your limbs attached and your bodily functions operating. Tupac and Suge, at least, were still united in hostility toward their rivals at Bad Boy Entertainment. Tupac's first album, released by Death Row Records, 1996's All Eyes on Me, sold more than 500,000 copies during its first week in the stores, earning $10 million, second only to the Beatles' anthology as the best commercial opening in the history of the music industry.
Wow.
Executives at other labels were duly impressed, but even more astonished by the vehemence of Tupac's attack on Puffy Combs and East Coast rappers in the song Hit 'Em Up. Especially startling was Tupac's vicious assault on Biggie Smalls, whom he continued to blame for his shooting at Quad Studios. For several months before the album's release, Tupac had been seen at parties in LA with Biggie's wife, singer Faith Evans. Evans, who knew that her husband had been carrying on with his former flame Lil' Kim, called Tupac mad cool in one interview and agreed to perform with him on a number for Shakur's new album. Biggie's wife was startled and embarrassed, however, when the song came out with the title, Wonder Why They Call You Bitch. Even more humiliating was Tupac's claim to an interviewer from The Source that he had been sleeping with Faith. Tupac repeated this claim, only much more crudely on Hit 'Em Up. I fucked your bitch, you fat motherfucker. Biggie handled the attendant publicity with an impressive aplomb. If Honey was to give you the pussy, he told an interviewer, why would you disrespect her like that? If you had a beef with me and you're like, boom, I'ma fuck his wife, why would you be so harsh on her? Like you got a beef with her. That shit doesn't make sense. Little more than a month after the release of All Eyes on Me, Biggie came to Los Angeles to accept an award at the 1996 Soul Train Awards, and in his speech, thanked Brooklyn. Loud jeers erupted from the death row section of the audience. Afterward, Biggie and Tupac came face to face for the first time in almost 2 years. When he looked in Tupac's eyes, Biggie said, I thought, yo, this nigga is really bugging the fuck out. Suge Knight was at Tupac's side, and both were surrounded by a security squad of bad-looking bloods as they began to shout, we gonna settle this right now. Bad boy rapper Lil Cease shouted from behind the Southside Crips who were working security for Biggie, fuck you, nigga, East Coast, motherfucker. Tupac yelled back, we on the west side now, we gonna handle this shit. As the two sides faced off, one of the Crips drew a gun, and the crowd scattered from the clutch of scuffling, shouting gangbangers. Puffy ran away, his bodyguard Eugene Deal would recall. He said after, I'm tired of this. I won't live my life like this. He says, I don't give a fuck if Tupac gotta die. I don't give a fuck if Big gotta die. After the incident, both Biggie and Puffy admitted that the East Coast-West Coast feud was real, a point that had been driven home when Tupac sent a hand-delivered letter reading, West Side Up, to the Bad Boy offices. Tupac ain't mad at the niggas that shot him, Combs told an interviewer. He knows where they're at. He knows who shot him. If you ask him, he knows, and everybody in the street knows, and he's not stepping to them because he knows he can't get away with that shit. To me, that's some real sucker shit. Suge replied that the feud wasn't between the East and West Coasts, but between ghetto niggas and phony niggas. Puffy, he said, was a phony nigga. He's fronting, trying to be something he ain't. Here's the whole thing.
Let me stop this. I got to. They could have had somebody read. I don't know who the narrator of this book is, but he when he get into the slang part of this whole thing, it is freaking hilarious. I'm trying not to laugh because I want to. But let me keep playing. I'm sorry.
With Puffy, they say shit to make themselves bigger. I ain't never did no interview saying shit about people. By saying
I ain't never did no
shit about death row in magazines, they trying to put themselves on our level, and it ain't no motherfucking comparison. Suge's proposed solution to the conflict was to put Puffy and Tupac in a boxing ring together. Look at Puffy's body, Knight said. Who can he whoop? How you gonna talk shit and be in a girl's body? And I'll beat Biggie's ass all over the ring. We can do it in Vegas and give the money to the ghetto. In April of 1996, Suge upped the ante by announcing that Death Row Records intended to open an East Coast division in Manhattan. Tupac advised a radio station in Oakland that Suge meant to sign New York-based acts like Big Daddy Kane and Wu-Tang Clan. Observing from the sidelines, Dr. Dre commented, "If it keeps up this way, pretty soon niggas from the East Coast ain't gonna be able to come out here and vice versa." Suge Knight, however, brought a huge entourage with him to New York for the MTV Awards show on September 7th. The group made an aggressively grand entrance, stalking past the music industry executives, some of them presidents of other labels who waited in line with tickets in hand, to take seats without delay. After the show, the Death Row group had to be separated from Bad Boys' contingent by more than 20 NYPD officers. Only a few weeks earlier, Puffy Combs had made his most ominous comments on the East versus West feud in an interview with Vibe. Bad boys move in silence. If somebody wants to get your ass, they're gonna wake up in heaven. There ain't no record gonna be made about it. It ain't gonna be no interviews. It's gonna be straight up. Oh shit, where am I? What are these, wings on my back? Puffy had ended the interview by telling Vibe, "I'm ready for this beef to come to a head, however it got to go down. I'm ready for it to be out of my life and be over with." Tupac Shakur seemed finally to feel the same way. His decision to leave Death Row had changed him, according to his fiancée, Kidada Jones, whose father, Quincy Jones, owned Vibe. Tupac was tired of the lifestyle he had been sharing with Suge Knight, Kidada said. Instead of hanging out at strip clubs, she told an interviewer, Tupac had taken up cooking. After finishing his next album, the last he owed Death Row Records under the contract he had signed in the prison at Dannemora, Kidada said, Tupac might sign with Warner Brothers. Her boyfriend also intended to move out of the house Death Row had leased for him and settle with her in another part of town, perhaps father a child. Any doubt about Tupac's intention to break with Death Row had been removed on August 27th, when the rapper made the move that a lot of people predicted would get him killed, firing David Kenner as his attorney. Outside the MTV Awards show 1 week later, Tupac seemed intent upon defusing rather than escalating the East versus West feud. "We are businessmen. We are not animals," he told the interviewer for a film crew, who asked what would happen if Death Row met Bad Boy inside. "It's not like we're going to see them and rush them and jump on them." As word that Tupac Shakur had discharged David Kenner spread through the music industry, Suge Knight insisted the problem was between the two of them and that he had no hard feelings toward Tupac. At the MTV Awards in New York, Suge invited Tupac to join him in Las Vegas for the Mike Tyson-Bruce Seldon heavyweight title fight.
Anyway, y'all want to go ahead and stop it there, but that is just an excerpt from Labyrinth, Ronald Sutherland. I'm just tripping. I'm sorry I had to stop it, y'all, in the middle of it, but I was just how him using this guy he's a, sounds like he's a very proper young man, and he's trying to read the slang, the quotes from the different rappers from different Bad Boy and Death Row groups, and him reading their quotes is hilarious. Ain't got no beef with so he's ensuring him he had no beef. Oh my God. Wow. Yeah, this is a really good book, man. I didn't know that Tupac had his own film company that he was trying to start. He was trying to start producing movies, you know. Hey man, I just think, man, what he could have done if he would have lived, you know. And it's just sad that brothers just can't get along. Like the fact that they got to have 20 police officers to keep two group of black men from killing each other. That's y'all doing music. You think music would bring people together, but we find a way to take music and use it as a tool to go against each other, you know? I was just thinking about the whole thing with Boosie being arrested. Like you either gonna be a gangster or you're gonna be an entertainer. You can't do both, you know. And you see what happens when they try to do both. You see what happened to Death Row. It was trying to be gangster and be an entertainment company. They wanted to be they wanted to be like the mafia and be a record label at the same time. That don't work out. And as you can see, Death Row, which could have been a beautiful record label. If Death Row was ran properly, could you imagine what could have been with that? That would have been a multi black owned, be a $1 billion company Because you got to think, Dre would have stayed, Tupac would still be alive. He would have probably signed 50 Cent, Eminem. You see what I'm saying? All that under one roof. Come on, man. Anyway, what do y'all think about this book, Labyrinth, by Randall Sullivan? It's on audio. It's on Audible, so you guys can go check it out. Whenever you get a chance, give me a thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel. Appreciate it, guys. Y'all take care. It's your boy Charles. Charles on This World, just checking in. Hope you guys are having a good evening. We are getting ready to delve into another book audio reaction. Let's go ahead and play it, and I'm gonna come back with my reaction. Appreciate it, guys.
Tupac was taken to Manhattan's Bellevue Hospital, but didn't remain there long. He feared for his life, and though the Fruit of Islam provided security, they weren't carrying guns. He left Bellevue and was admitted to Metropolitan Hospital under an assumed name, but said he still received an anonymous, threatening phone call from someone saying, "You ain't dead yet?" Shortly after surgery, he checked himself out, against doctor's orders, and went to the home of his friend, actress Jasmine Guy. They'd worked together on the sitcom A Different World. He played Jada Pinkett's thugged-out ex-boyfriend, Piccolo. Tupac's father, Bill Garland, visited him while he recovered, and they stoked the fire of their long-lost relationship, even smoking pot together at Guy's place. "I was fucked up," Garland said. He also said he exchanged pleasantries with Biggie, who came to visit Tupac in the hospital. Garland remains convinced Biggie didn't know about the shooting in advance, and at this point, Tupac hadn't accused him either. On December 1st, 1994, Tupac arrived to a New York City courtroom wearing bandages and confined to a wheelchair, and was pronounced guilty of sexual abuse in the Ayanna Jackson case, though acquitted on the sodomy and weapons charges. Sentenced to a minimum of a year and a half in prison, pending appeal, his bail was set at $3 million. To some observers, the case against Tupac was weak, the punishment and bail harsh. Was it payback for his anti-cop lyrics? An in-depth New Yorker article by Connie Bruck concluded that Tupac was penalized more for who he was, a charismatic gangster rapper with a political background, than for what he had done. Unable to raise bail, Tupac served most of his time at Clinton Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison in upstate New York, the same prison where two men escaped in 2015, inspiring a dramatic manhunt where one was killed and the other recaptured. Guards sought to humiliate him, Tupac's lawyer said. A rumor surfaced that he was raped, which he denied. Meanwhile, his paranoia and anger intensified. He called Haitian Jack and henchmen the Walking Dead. Prison wasn't entirely a hardship, however. Tupac dried out. He wrote a screenplay and read The Art of War. Al Sharpton visited. He got mail from Jim Carrey and Tony Danza, the latter of whom urged him to stay strong. "He is the bomb forever," Tupac told MTV of Danza. Maya Angelou came to visit at his request, and he immediately besieged her with questions about James Baldwin and Tolstoy. He signed autographs for fellow prisoners, including a white supremacist who wanted one for his little cousins. While inside, Tupac married a woman he'd been seeing named Keisha Morris, a criminal justice student who was something of a straight arrow. They'd met at a party thrown by Puffy. She was not impressed by his advances, which only made him try harder. On their first date, in summer 1994, they saw Forrest Gump. At dinner afterward, he mentioned that he'd read for the part of Bubba, but their relationship was difficult from the start. Morris lived in Harlem, while Tupac, drawn by cheaper real estate, resided primarily in Atlanta, along with his mother and members of his group, the Outlaws. Morris supported him during his trial and moved close to the prison to better assist him. But following his release, the marriage collapsed. She said she felt used, but didn't harbor animosity. Me Against the World, Tupac's third album, was released soon after his prison sentence began. Its tone was a departure from his first two albums. Whereas Brenda's Got a Baby came from headlines, now his own stories were news, and the album begins with reporters running down his trials and tribulations. He'd never been particularly optimistic, but World descends into full-blown paranoia and anguish, as evidenced by song titles like If I Die Tonight and Fuck the World. Struggling and striving, my destiny's to die, he raps on Death Around the Corner. His album with Thug Life the year previous also reflected his transition from would-be revolutionary to presumably doomed street soldier on songs like Bury Me a G. But Me Against the World also had buoyant tracks like Old School, an homage to New York rappers who laid the foundation of the genre, and Young Niggas, a cautionary tale to would-be baby gangsters. Dear Mama would become one of the most beloved songs in hip-hop history. The album came out a year before Bill Clinton signed his notorious welfare reform law, and the track portrayed its African-American female protagonist as a hero. The song's most famous line, "Even as a crack fiend, Mama, you always was a black queen, Mama," harbors nuance rare in popular music. Despite little promotion, Me Against the World went double platinum and became his best-selling album yet. Tupac considered making it his swan song. He was tired of all of the music industry drama, but his passion reignited after a disturbing rumor began to sink in. One that came from people he trusted, that Biggie knew in advance about the Quad Studio shooting. "He owed me more than to turn his head and act like he didn't know niggas was about to blow my fucking head off," he said later. And even if Biggie hadn't set him up, he should at least have been able to find out who did it. "You don't know who shot me in your hometown? These niggas from your neighborhood." This probably wasn't entirely fair. According to sources I interviewed for this book, even if Biggie knew about the setup in advance, which is far from certain, he may have been helpless to stop it or warn Tupac, without risking violence upon himself. The way Tupac saw it, the whole thing was fucked. Someone tried to harm him, and when they couldn't do that, the justice system got him for a crime he didn't commit. And now it turned out that his own friend had betrayed him? A friend whom Tupac had helped to acquire fame and fortune? Angry and seeking revenge, Tupac decided he was ready to start recording again, to pay back his enemies.
Looking for a professional photographer for your next big event? Need video of your special day? Then look no further. For $100 an hour, have a professional photographer or videographer shoot your wedding, birthday party, quinceañera, bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, anniversary party, or whatever your special occasion may be. Highlight your event with professional, crisp photos and video. Check out Charles Arness Photography on Instagram, as well as book us for your next event. Must live in the Southern California area.
Selling My Soul. Before he went to prison, both Ruthless Records and Death Row were vying for Tupac's services. Tupac rolled with Easy to industry events. They shared meals, and some Ruthless camp members took to wearing Thug Life caps. "Tupac was around us every day," said Cold 187 from Ruthless group Above the Law. Mo Preem said Easy had talked with Tupac about signing Thug Life to Ruthless. Eazy's assistant, Sharice Henry, believes that if Eazy were still alive when Tupac got out of prison, he would have signed with the label. Meanwhile, Tupac appeared on the Death Row orchestrated Above the Rim soundtrack and was paid well to record a song for the Murder Was the Case soundtrack, which wasn't even used. Suge did him the favor to support him during his legal wranglings, Tupac said. Tupac began to see Suge as a well-funded, well-armed potential ally. While in prison, he asked his wife Keisha Morris to relay a message to Suge. He was broke and needed help. On top of the lawyer's fees and everything else, his mother was losing her house. Suge sent $15,000 and put it on his books, said Reggie Wright Jr., Death Row's head of security. Tupac was jubilant and sent Suge another message, that he'd like to see him. Few places in the U.S. were farther away from Los Angeles than Dannemora, New York, where Tupac was incarcerated, but Suge began coming out to see him. Further, Death Row offered him something no one else seemed to be able to deliver: release. Death Row's lawyer, David Kenner, pledged to help Tupac with his case and began working to spring him on an appeal bond. Suge didn't just try to recruit Tupac to his label. He offered him a place in his family, the most powerful and out-of-control family in hip-hop. Death Row was under the umbrella of Interscope, the label where Tupac released his first 3 albums. Relinquishing Tupac to Death Row amounted to little more than shuffling paperwork, at least from a corporate perspective. Suge's courtship of Tupac came with Jimmy Iovine and Interscope's blessing. According to many accounts, Iovine seemed anxious to get rid of Tupac, stressed out about the chaos surrounding his every move. From a musical perspective, pairing Tupac with Dre, a producer the rapper had long admired, was smart. In real life, the consequences of putting Suge and Tupac together would be nuclear, and some have blamed Iovine for not anticipating the fallout. Iovine declined comment on this issue. Although many close to him advised him against it, Tupac decided to jump to Death Row. "I know I'm selling my soul to the devil," he said. Tupac's manager, Atron Gregory, who'd worked tirelessly for Tupac's release, grudgingly stepped aside. On September 16, 1995, Kenner presented Tupac with a 3-page handwritten memo, standing in for a contract, appointing Suge as his manager, and binding him to Death Row for 3 albums, promising him an advance of at least $1 million per work, as well as $500,000 in expenses, including $125,000 for a car and $250,000 for his legal fund. Less than a month later, Interscope and Atlantic Records put up the $1.4 million bond, and he was out. Though Tupac always thanked Suge for bailing him out, he didn't actually supply the money. Suge's role seems to have had more to do with greasing the wheels, and the $1.4 million was actually an advance on Tupac's future royalties. "It wasn't a legal contract," said Charles Ogletree Jr., a lawyer who would later represent Tupac. "It was absurd that anyone with an opportunity to reflect would agree to those terms. It was only because he was in prison that he signed it." Suge Knight's dual role as Tupac's manager and his label representation was a conflict of interest. But the deal came with front-end benefits, including a house for a fanny and material spoils galore for Tupac: vehicles, jewelry, vacations. Outside the prison's doors, a white limousine took him to a private plane, and he was off.